Good morning, Steve Trueblue here in Sydney. What I want to do today is to give you a very quick and succinct summary of how to oust Marxism from our schools using industrial hygiene, occupational health and safety laws. The example I'm going to give is this. You get kids in school, you practice fire drills, the teacher instructs them, rehearses them to go out of the class in an orderly fashion, walk, don't run, that sort of thing. And they go out in the playground and the teacher calls the roll to make sure everyone's present and accounted for. And that just seems so wonderful and obvious safety training for everybody. A complete legal or moral mockery of that is then made when the children go in from the fire drill back into the classroom to be indoctrinated into the Marxist transgender suicide cult, which is a clear breach of occupational health and safety guidelines. Transgender surgery has 40% suicide rate. It's a massive casualty rate. And Johns Hopkins medical school has basically issued an edict saying they're not going to do it anymore, and it's pseudoscience at best, and such a casualty rate is unacceptable. Johns Hopkins Medical School have said that in numerous things on the internet. You can find that. What I mean to say is that we really need industrial laws to be enforced in schools. Thin end of the wedge for transgender suicide cult indoctrination is gender fluidity. And I think industrial inspectors should be coming in and fining teachers personally thousands of dollars for mentioning gender fluidity at all, even broaching the subject, because little people are very impressionable, and what you're actually doing to them is putting them on a course to suicide in future years, likely when they're 25, 30 something, right? So that's the basic idea, and we have to establish this meme in our social media. That's easily done, and that's where you people come in. You can share this video. You can get the idea being talked about by our opinion leaders all over the internet. And you might start suggesting people who would like to run with this idea underneath this video. Start putting in suggestions if you could. My suggestion would be Mike Adams at Natural Health. He's very much into vaccine safety, drugs, vitamins, GMOs, that sort of thing. And to me, it's this business where you inculcate little people 5 years old and you say to them, little Johnny, third day at school, and they say, well, what gender would you like to be? You can be a boy one day, a girl the next, and then you can be a lumberjack in suspenders and a bra or something. What they're actually teaching there is gender dysphoria, which is industrially induced gender dysphoria. It's a workplace disease and it's incurable according to Johns Hopkins Medical School. So Marxist indoctrination is inducing in some children at school an incurable disease, certified incurable by Johns Hopkins University. Now, straight away, you get away from this video, what do? You have to start, this is your job, conservative person, concerned about the way society's going. Start archiving all the Google references to Johns Hopkins University and the horror death rate of transgenic surgery. It's something like 40%. It's 2,000% elevated, okay? But start archiving them in your home computer. Put them on USB sticks, offline hard drives, and the best format seems to be not just screen snapshots, but maybe Word docs, WordPad documents, and the thing I like is printing things to PDF. Now I'm suggesting we could reinstall all that stuff on Mike Adams' Good Gopher independent search engine. It's not part of Google. Google's going to start disappearing these articles on Johns Hopkins horror casualty figures on transsexual suicide rate, which is about 40%. Okay, it's going to start disappearing, going down the rankings, and finally one day you won't be able to find it at all. But at least we'll be able to have it on Good Gopher by Mike Adams at Natural News. That's one place to go. And I believe there's another search engine called DuckDuckGo, which is a kind of protest group. I don't know a lot about that yet. So for a long, long time, we've had a lot of people protesting Marxism, but not been able to do anything but debate and discuss. You can bash social justice warriors up. They're generated by the school system, school teachers, Marxists, all coming out of university, and they're brainwashing our little children into a suicide cult. Now, there's a few things you can do with this knowledge once you've got it in this sort of format. You can make up memes for Twitter. One meme could be this. Marxist teachers groom children for transgender suicide cult. That's something you could put on Twitter. Another one would be, like asbestos, transsexualism and gender fluidity must be removed from schools. I think it's as deadly as asbestos, that the death rate is potentially huge in the future. And it's been called absurd pseudoscience that's got no basis in reality by Johns Hopkins Medical School. So start collecting the articles, okay? So there's a few things you can do. If we just proliferate this meme in social media, it will find fertile ground somewhere where a legal case can be commenced by motivated people who are positioned appropriately to do this. Perhaps insiders in some education department could help. Let's learn from the left. We must have some sympathetic people in the education systems around the world who are throwing their hands in the air but don't know how to stop Marxism. They desperately want to do something. They can find the meme that we can generate in social media. The ultimate thing I would like to see is to see industrial inspectors who are famous, in Australia at least, for turning up at work sites and factories, and they say, look, there's two men there without safety boots. $1,000 fine for the employer, on the spot, no argument. They behave like parking cops. What am I seeing? Those two men are using an unsafe practice. They're running machines without safety guards on them. Right, $10,000 fine for the employer. It's the second time you've been told, right? I think school teachers imparting Marxist gender fluidity to students have to be fined on the spot, and also school principals and possibly boards of governors or all the administrators who run the schools. Now, how would you can't really barge in. The teacher's going to stop talking while the inspector's in the room, right? We know human nature, don't we? So what would you do? Well, the inspector could approach all the little kids at lunchtime and just say, what are you learning today? Oh, you're doing crayons, are you? Righto. And what else are you learning? Oh, you're learning ABC, right. And you've learned a few numbers? Good. Are you enjoying yourself at school? Righto. And just engage them in chatter and see if they say anything about gender fluidity. Inspectors can be trained to look for it. This is the only people you can trust are really innocent little people, and ask, well, what are you learning today at school? Right, that sort of thing. Away from the teacher, out in the playground. Now, also, got to be some 1-800 number that everybody can call, like concerned parents. If little children are talking about this, if little Johnny comes home from school wearing a dress, the parents should have a number to call, basically an insurance company, saying, I want you to stop my son being inculcated into, groomed into a suicide cult, because my little Johnny's coming home wearing dresses all the time, and I don't want that to happen. This was triggered, by the way, by this whole idea came to me triggered by watching a short English video of Liberal interviewers accusing a happily married man of being a bigot for taking his young son out of school where they were grooming him in gender fluidity. He just said it's too much, he's going to be homeschooled from now on. That's not a viable solution for hundreds of millions of people. Enforcement of industrial law is, because it's backed up by the muscle of insurance companies. Hope I've given you a lot to think about today, boys and girls. Please write your recommendations beneath this video for community leaders, opinion leaders who could run with this meme, helping it to find fertile soil to grow a court case in. Okay, and this can then ripple around the Western world with the legal precedent system that we have. And just then, as we're speaking, another idea occurred to me, another position of leverage is that an argument against transgender surgery and gender fluidity grooming is that most of the operations are done on medical benefits, picked up by the taxpayer basically. So the argument could easily be put, why should the state subsidise your suicide? Your 40% suicide rate. Well, how can the government do that? How can any medical system subsidise basically mass suicide? That's what's happening. And I want us to put memes together and converse about this all over the net and get it established in people's heads. In this industrial law format, I think that's the way to oust Marxism from schools utterly and completely, with massive fines for teachers that impart gender fluidity keywords and all that sort of stuff to very impressionable little people. Can I just point out to you that industrial health and safety regulation, sometimes called occupational health, is an industry in itself, and it's a lot of money. It's backed up by very muscular insurance companies, and occupational health and safety regulations apply to primary schools, high schools and universities. So even at university you will notice over the doors there are battery-powered exit signs that are designed to work and be visible if the smoke fills the room and the lights are off because the power's been cut, right? So it's ridiculous to go to that level of safety to protect human life just so that people can learn about a suicide cult from the Marxists that has a 40% suicide rate, okay? So, and the introductory course at university for transsexual suicide is gender fluidity. Now, what's happened is that Western people, in particular men, I think, who really are action-oriented, want to do something, but you're up against a major enemy. That is, every level of government and university has been infiltrated by Marxist useful idiots. This is due to the long march through the institutions since 1923. You can look up the Frankfurt Institute, which later moved to Columbia University. Now, insurance companies can close down any work area that introduces suicidal teaching. It's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt by the Johns Hopkins Medical School. And I'm going to put a simple rule of thumb for you men who are so practical out there. I want you to get on this straight away. I know you're all practical and this is also obvious to you. The measure of a philosophy worth teaching at university or high school or primary school is basically its suicide rate. If it causes suicide, if it adds to the body count of Marxism already, then it's a really bad philosophy and shouldn't be taught because it's hazardous to the health and well-being of the people learning the course. So don't teach courses that kill people. Because transgender reassignment surgery is a delayed death sentence which begins when little Johnny's 5 years old and goes to school. Parents are sending kids to school hoping they're going to learn the 3 R's. That's what the understanding of education is. And instead, little Johnny's coming home wearing a dress and he wants to be a lumberjack wearing a bra and skirt on Fridays or something. That's the beginning of the long-term slow Holocaust suicide cult called Marxism. Okay? Just to get the ball rolling, I'll give you a few suggestions and you can tell me your responses below this video. And it's going to be this. I'm going to suggest that we could ask Mark Collett to do an opinion on this. Mark Collett, he's a very motivated and experienced person in court cases, right? Very good at that. Blonde in the Belly of the Beast is a lovely young lady who deprogrammed herself from a completely Marxist education. She's very forthright and very hard-working video commentator. She's worth listening to. I'd love to get her opinion on this. Jordan Peterson, I would love to hear what he says about this simple application of the rule of law to restore civilization. It would seem to me a wonderful adjunct to his legal battles he's having with, I think, is it 16C or something, some ridiculous free speech thing. A clue he could introduce would be to the legal discussion about that is, if it boosts the suicide rate, it's toxic and can't be done. And all that gender stuff in Canada is boosting the suicide rate. It's also destroying society socially. So it's something he might be able to throw into the mix there to aid his own legal position. And similarly, you might be able to enlist the commentaries of Paul Joseph Watson. There's other people, Stefan Molyneux. There's a whole bunch of other forthright conservative commentators who would like to actually do something off the net that makes a difference. So far we've done basically a whole lot of net chatter, and some of these opinion leaders have got wonderful followings, but they're still not doing much. They're only making videos and doing chats, you see. Here's something you could do off the net. Start court cases against education systems that are teaching a death cult to little children, our future, our society. I keep having afterthoughts on this, but they seem useful, so I'll just tell you one more thing. Jordan Peterson is mired in some regulation 16C thing, I think it's called, about the forced use of gender pronouns, which are invented by communists, you see. And can I say this, we need to get this idea to Jordan Peterson, I'd love to hear his opinion on it, that if you agree to use a transgender person's ridiculously personally preferred pronoun, then you are contributing to their suicide. Okay, you're going along with their gender dysphoria, and the operation they had predisposes them to 40% chance of suicide. By going along with it, you are culpable yourself. So you're actually doing them a service by refusing to join in the game of gender dysphoria. You're promoting an incurable mental disease by agreeing with them to use their ridiculous communist pronouns. Okay, I hope we can get this to Jordan Peterson. I know he's a wonderful man, and he's got a hell of a lot on his plate currently. Very hard to get his attention. I hope this reaches him somehow. Maybe some video viewers here will know how to reach him. I don't even know his email address or whether he ever gets through all his emails. I don't know. But I'd sure like to help the man, and there's many other commentators like him who we should include with this message. Yet another afterthought would be that if we are forced to continue with Marxism in schools, that it's got to have daily warnings about the body count, and that it generates in some people, a sizable portion of the population, a gender dysphoria, which is an incurable mental disease. And so you're going to have to do, if you study Marxism, have something like warnings on cigarette packets, that studying this can be hazardous to your health. Do you really want to learn Marxism? Because it's a pathway to suicide. Okay, so daily warnings in the lectures that studying this very material can lead to suicide. So do you really want to study it? I mean, that's the question you've got to ask yourself. What's the point of learning Marxism when all it does is destroy things? So learn Gulag Archipelago, but you've got to get daily warnings that lurking in the wings of Marxism is gender dysphoria, an incurable disease which comes out of Marxism, namely gender fluidity, which leads to the suicide cult aspect. So the body count of Marxism will continue to rise. It's already hundreds of millions of people, and they want your children to suicide as well. It's an insatiable monster, is Marxism. Okay, guys, you know what to do. We have to get this sort of stuff, this sort of material, these ideas to significant opinion leaders like Jordan Peterson on the internet and other people too. So, can you help me out there? Steve here in Sydney, Steve Trueblue, over and out.